We made Dolly Parton's favorite banana pudding cake, and we're showing you exactly how we did it. Isn't it beautiful? I was really impressed with how this cake turned out, but I've got some do's and don'ts to share with you. Our ingredients are all measured out, so let's go. We've got a box of Dolly Parton's Southern Style Banana Cake from Duncan Hines, and we're using the recipe on the back of the box. The recipe on the back of the box calls for 1 box of cake mix, 1 cup of milk, ½ cup melted butter, 4 eggs, and 3 tablespoons of pudding mix. So I'm making a change here and dividing the batter into 3 6-inch pans instead of the 2 8-inch pans like the recipe calls for. And this is because we want 2 layers of pudding in the cake instead of just 1. I feel like the cake to pudding ratio here is off and the cake might be a little dry. So having that extra layer is going to help me out. Plus, I just like the look of a tall, pretty 3-layer cake. This is just a personal preference. The choice is yours. Once the cakes are cooled, I start prepping the ingredients to stack the cake. The first step is to whisk the leftover pudding mix with milk and let stand for a minute until it is very thick. Watch out here because 1 minute is not enough. Mine sat for 15 before it was thick enough to put on the cake. You definitely don't want to put the pudding on your cake until it is fully thickened. Otherwise, it's just going to run all over the place. The next step is to whip the frosting. It's heavy cream and Dolly Parton's Buttercream frosting. What you get is something quite a bit thinner than a normal buttercream frosting, but I put it in a piping bag anyway to give me more control. Then I crushed vanilla wafers and got started. What I'm doing here is piping a dam around the edge of the cake to hold the pudding and the other ingredients inside. If I don't do that, everything could kind of seep out the edges, and I definitely don't want that. The frosting extends over the edges of the cake, and in a minute you'll see here that gives me just enough frosting as I'm smoothing the edge of the cake to give me the beautiful naked cake look. I put a hearty spoonful of pudding down, crushed vanilla wafers, and then I sliced my bananas on demand. That way they didn't have time to brown. To further prevent the browning, I added some pudding on top to encapsulate the bananas inside. If you don't do this, the bananas will brown underneath the cake layer. This cake is going to be so much more delicious with 2 layers of pudding. I added frosting to the top and then smoothed out the cake with a really thin layer of the frosting to give it a rustic, naked effect. Once I got my cake board cleaned, I chilled the cake for an hour. The box recommends to refrigerate for 15 minutes, but I just don't think that's enough, especially here with 3 layers. And I didn't want to use cake straws to support the cake, so chilling it was the best option for me. Cake straws would have just ruined the pretty center. To decorate this cake, I crushed more vanilla wafers, but this time they're a little more fine, and I just pressed them into the edge of the cake, going up about 1/3 of the way. This will give you a little more crunch, but also leaves the contrast between the frosting and the naked cake layers. Everything here is just various shades of whites and tans, so anything you can do to make it look pretty is a good decision. For the top, I used straight out of the can Dolly Parton's Duncan Hines Creamy Buttercream frosting in a piping bag to make icing piles, and I alternated those with vanilla wafers. The piles here are tall but narrow enough so that I can use them as a guide when I'm slicing the cake. Each slice will get 1 cookie and 1 icing pile. More crushed vanilla wafers in the center of the cake is going to finish this off. The box says to decorate the cake with banana slices, but I don't think that's a good look. They're going to start browning immediately, and unless you're going to serve this cake right away, I'd say pass on the bananas and just use them as a garnish when you're plating your cake. And there you have it. This cake is gorgeous. Banana pudding is naturally a rustic dessert. In the South, we just layer it in a casserole dish, and there you go. This cake elevates the dessert, and I would be proud to serve this at any party. And I think Dolly would be too. One more tip before we cut the cake. You have to keep it refrigerated. There's dairy in the frosting and the pudding, so you've got to keep it refrigerated. It doesn't say to do this on the box, but unless you're serving and eating right away, keep it in the refrigerator. I kept mine in there for 4 hours before I cut the cake, and look. This cake cut so clean. My pudding layer stayed intact. It was absolutely gorgeous. Plated, and I served it with extra crushed cookies and sliced bananas. You can see the inside of the cake. There are no browned bananas. And then my garnish looks so fresh and pretty. One final note, when you keep a cake in the fridge, the fats solidify and the cake can sometimes be a little dry. Think about how butter is a solid in the fridge but soft at room temperature. Having that second layer of pudding really helped to balance it out. We absolutely love Dolly Parton's products from Duncan Hines. And if you'd like to watch more, you can watch our Dolly Parton Cakes playlist here and subscribe for more videos.